The beaches are always being closed because of waste spills, right?
Yeah.
And surfers are territorial. They stick mostly to certain breaks. If we can get some hair samples and get a match at a certain beach, we'd know which break the ex-presidents surf. You buying this?
No.
No.
But let's do it anyway. It will bug the shit out of Harp.
My man.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Kino Summer Series, first of the year. We're back. It's June. We're chilling. I decided to do a Kathryn Bigelow film, but not a war Kathryn Bigelow film, but a cool surfer, Keanu Reeves, 1991.
This is about war, man.
Yeah.
This is a war of ideas.
Yeah.
This is a war of personalities. All right.
That's fair.
This is what the film students would call dialectics.
Hell yeah. Well, this is one that I've been meaning to watch for a while. I'm hit and miss on Kathryn Bigelow. I don't really like stuff like The Hurt Locker, Zero Dark 30. I liked them when I first watched them, but it's just not stuff I'm looking for when I go to the movies.
What do you look? I know we're talking Point Break. What do you not like about The Hurt Locker, for instance? But again, I have not seen that movie since it came out, and I enjoyed it when it came out.
I just don't like the stuff about the Iraq War. I have a weird, gross 2000s feeling towards it. It's just not stuff that interests me. I'd much rather watch a Vietnam movie or a World War II movie.
Right, because that's escapist for you. Because that's not a wars that we witnessed.
Yeah, I have plenty of trauma from my mom and family warmongering.
But those movies are liberal hand wringing about the futility of those wars.
I know, but I also don't like the making the hunting for Osama bin Laden into this like action journey
where the world is Carmen San Diego.
Well, it's just like by the time they found Osama bin Laden, we had already pulled out of Iraq. We'd already pretty much, it was on the way out. It just felt like we need to do this because it's the American thing to do. And okay, we got Osama, cool, but that didn't change anything really. When ISIS stepped up to the plate right after that.
Yeah, you can't kill an idea.
I know.
And well, fortunately, the Middle East is better than ever now. But hey, nothing's happening there now. I don't know. It's kind of like hell. Okay. Furiosa was a metaphor for the Iraq War or for the Afghan War, because spoilers, if you haven't seen Furiosa, skip ahead of 90 seconds into this. But at the end, when she's confronting Dementis, she learns that revenge will not bring her old life back. And I think that's Dementis is Osama bin Laden. I think that's what I'm getting at. And Anya Taylor-Joy's Chris Pratt. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like they're doing that Black Ops 6, and it's like 90. It's like around this time. It's like Gulf War stuff, Saddam Hussein stuff. I'm like, okay, I guess this is just enough of like an older thing.
Well, I feel, and that's the whole. If we're talking about Black Ops 6, that's going to be a fictionalized, like shadow government sort of, Tom Clancy novel-esque sort. Yeah, it's going to be. Clinton's going to be in it. They got Clinton. They showed Clinton in the trailer. I was like, oh shit, Clinton's in this. Arkansas represent, I guess.
You have to fly his plane to Epstein Island. It's gonna be
awesome. You got to rescue him from Epstein's Island.
Anyway,
that would be a great. Hey, I would buy that day one on game. I would play that day one on Game Pass if you were just like gunning down pedophiles at Epstein's Island. It was like the airport mission in Modern Warfare 2, but you're just gunning down pedophiles. I'd be okay with that.
Stephen Hawking has a machine gun on his chair. Like,
oh yeah, no, it's like he's souped up like Mecha Hitler from time.
Yeah. Well, there's one film Kathryn Bigelow's done that I love. I don't know why we haven't done on. We will do it at some point on this show here. Strange Days from 95. That's the OG virtual reality movie of like we can save memories and it's become like a form of underground currency and like it's very atmospheric and there's this cool New York or New York like New Year's Eve kind of thing. And it's very much like you can tell Black Mirror took from it. It's kind of like
Yeah.
it's kind of light cyberpunk in that way. So we'll talk about that sometime, but like I wanted to check out more of her 90s stuff and I've been putting this one off for a while. Usually, with a lot of these summer series I've seen them, I've vetted them, but this one I haven't seen at all. I was like, fuck it, we'll go in blind. I love Keanu Reeves. Screw it.
Right. No, this movie is starring he was at the time one of the most underrated actors of his generation. And as time has gone on, he's become more and more wise and sage-like. He's become more and more appreciated as his style has evolved. And I'm talking about Gary Busey. Now, Gary Busey in this, that was just an easy Gary Busey joke. It is weird to see old, like pre-motorcycle crash Gary Busey where his brain was intact. And because when I see Gary Busey in movies, I really like him. I like him in this movie a lot.
Totally.
And I like him, as stupid as it is. There's an old movie I watched as a kid a lot called Rookie of the Year, it's like a baseball movie. I had on VHS, and he's in that. I don't know. I like him in that. I like Gary Busey, and I kind of like him now, even though I feel like he's being exploited, low-key. But also, I like that Gary Busey was on the Celebrity Apprentice ranting to the 45th president of the United States, who would then, I think, take Gary Busey's personality as a pointer on how to do his political career.
Yeah.
So am I saying Gary Busey is to blame for January 6th? Maybe. I don't know.
Who knows? Who's to say? Well, first of all, I'll say watching this movie, I guess I didn't realize how old Keanu Reeves is because it blew my mind that this movie came out the same year as Bogus Journey. Completely different.
I didn't realize until I looked at the timeline. I was like, oh, this is the same year. These are both.
I didn't realize he was 35 in The Matrix. I thought he was in like his mid 20s.
Well, that's the meme, is that how well he's aged. Although in the third Bill and Ted movie, which I did not watch, I know you did. You were like, eh. Without the beard, right. He does have, you can just see his skin more. But that's why I have a beard. I want to show as little of my face as possible.
Yeah, he should have kept the beard. That was a bizarre choice. But either way, like that's really crazy, like how much a haircut and costume can make him look like a teenager right out of high school. The same year in this, he looks like his age, like mid-20s. His age is crazy. And like he's almost 40 in the Matrix sequels. That is like blowing my mind. He just looks so good. And I'm definitely one of those guys who like I've never had a problem with Keanu, how he acts and stuff. It obviously depends on the director and the project, but like I think he's great. I like him in this movie a lot.
He is the perfect role for this movie. He's the perfect, because I think a lot of criticisms of his acting is that he can come across as overly stoic or wooden, but in certain roles, John Wick, Neo, that's perfect. That's exactly what the character calls for. In this, or some of the criticisms is that he can be a little too Ted-like or Bill-like. Always forget which one he is. But he can be a little too bro-y at times, or that it comes out in certain things. In this role, he gets to marry his stoicism as an FBI agent with his broiness as a surfer. It's the perfect marriage for him. And this was his first action movie. Like, we wouldn't get to The Matrix without this, because this led him to Speed a few years later, which led him to, I guess, Johnny Mnemonic.
I like that movie.
Cyberpunk. I need to see that. I've read the short story. I actually did read Neuromancer recently, which is a bit of a slog, honestly. But it's like, dude, that book laid out almost every cyberpunk trope. Like it all goes back to Neuromancer. It's crazy. And that is definitely like I don't know how they would film this unless they kind of want to do like a cheesy 90s view of the internet, because that's kind of what it is, with like we're jacking in and there's like
Yeah.
the grid and blah blah blah. They literally call it the Matrix in that, by the way, which makes the plot twist. If you never, like, if you had read Neuromancer and you were going into the Matrix in 99, you'd probably be like, what is it, like the internet is a computer? Like, I don't know, the twist wouldn't be as strong, but we're not talking about that. So no, I Keanu is perfect for this. He still surfs now. I think this did get him into surfing because he is like a stoic bro, you know, a bro with sadness, but who's overcome the sad Keanu meme where he was just hungry. Patrick, yeah, there's a great cast in this. Lori Petty is the love interest named Tyler. There's some homoerotic readings of this. Here's the thing with a lot of action movies being homoerotic, I think part of it is like, maybe I could, if I rewatch this with some sort of GWS or feminist lens, I might be able to point to it more of him discharging his gun in the air or whatever as being phallic imagery, which is sometimes a stretch, because then it's like, well, every action movie has guns. Is every gun phallic imagery? Like, I don't, is maybe according to some people. But there's also just the broiness, I think, stems at like a very carnal level from sexual competition, and like wanting to propagate your species. That's why there's sexual overtones or undertones to so much of like male machismo and competition in movies. Because I think like at a primal level, that's what it comes down to, is like fighting over women and sexual conquest, which there's a bit of a love triangle in this, not too much. But Lori Petty plays Tyler, which is a man's name, we'll say. I've never met have you met a girl, Tyler, ever?
I don't think so.
I don't think I have either. Lori Petty, I didn't realize, because she doesn't have stupid makeup in this movie, was in another classic Harbor movie that we reviewed, Tank Girl. Tank Girl herself is in this movie.
I immediately recognized her by her voice. I was like, whoa.
Okay. It was giving me uncanny vibes the whole movie. Mainly because Tank Girl is so forgettable that I probably had to connect the dots later.
Man, when I was editing that, because people, if you haven't watched, we did an episode on Tank Girl, but quickly in the episode, I realized that I hated the movie and I was running out of stuff to say. So we didn't release it initially just because it was like a 25-minute episode. I didn't feel it was very strong, but then there was a lull in our episodes. So I was like, I'll just throw that one up as a bonus episode. And it got, a lot of people found it funny. So yeah, that's like one of the worst movies we've done for this show. And I know it has a cult following, but like,
I think it might be the worst. It might be my least favorite movie done for this.
Watching this movie, every scene she's in, I was like, this just shows in comparison how insufferable Tank Girl is.
Yeah, she's good in this.
Whole time I was watching this movie, I thought that.
She's a good actress.
Yeah, she was good in it.
I'm glad I didn't put it together. It did make her performance or her presence on screen a bit uncanny, because it was just one of those like, who is this person? I can't. Yeah. And I didn't pause it and look it up. I figured I had just seen her.
The difference between you and I is like, I had to scan through the movie while editing the episode, so I saw a lot of stuff again, and that's when I doubled down. I was like, oh my God, I'm sick of editing this video because I'm so tired of watching these scenes.
Imagine editing the movie.
Yeah.
I've heard people who
Cody got upset when I revealed that we didn't like this movie. Or Tank Girl, I mean.
No, I like this movie.
Yeah.
This movie's I completely understand why it's a cult classic. And it ushered in, this movie ushered in the 90s about as much as Bill Clinton did. I think I put them of equal importance as 90s ushering in icons.
That's interesting to me because very early on I felt like when I was watching it, it felt like almost like an 80s script, a late 80s script that got kind of like left over and like didn't get produced until the early 90s. So it almost feels like there's this marriage there of like a lot of 80s isms, late 80s isms mixed with early 90s isms, and it blends pretty well. But like, just like the mesh of aesthetics and dialogue, very like hip with like crudeness and like surfer stuff, dirty jokes, pop culture references from like the cops who don't give a fuck, rude attitude. We're so late 80s, early
Lethal
90s.
Weapon. No, there were a lot of those cop action movies. A lot of which I think have kind of fallen to the wayside. Even Predator 2 is a cop movie, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
That's when did Predator 2 come out? 1 second. Yeah. 990. Well, I think a lot of times with culture, because I agree with you, I picked up on that as well. Because I started watching this, I was like, wait, is this 80s or 90s? And it's right on the cusp. So again, it is a transitional period. And this did even usher in like the 90s obsession up to the early aughts obsession with extreme sports, you know. I mean, it's surfing and skating and
Yeah,
BMX.
surfing's a religion in this movie.
It's a religion to people who do it.
Yeah.
We've both seen Endless Summer, you know.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful about surfing, particularly, is like it's so ripe for metaphors. It's kind of like reminds me of like Challengers and how it's great to make a movie about tennis because you can use that tennis as a metaphor for so many things. Surfing's the same way as a sport. You know, the idea of like being at peace, the ocean being this own organism. Because what other sport has like a dynamic field? Like a soccer field is a soccer field no matter what. There's nothing going on. The only thing I can think of is battle bots when there's like saw blades coming out of the floor and stuff. But that's not exactly what's happening. That would be awesome. That'd be awesome in this movie if there were like not enough sharks in this movie. They're not a single shark.
That's like one of the things I like most about it is the way Kathryn Bigelow and her crew capture the waves and surfing. It's very dreamy, real atmospheric. And it doesn't matter what type of day that she's shooting these sequences, they all look good in their own ways. Because, like, yeah, you get the good sunset shots at points and it looks beautiful, but like there's times where they're swimming at night or in the morning and stuff, and it all just captures well on film. It's one of those like before people started using cheap 90s films, there's a look in like the mid 90s where like I feel like I don't know what happened, but like it feels like cheaper than I don't know. There's just a certain look to mid 90s, and this is like right before.
The lighting I feel gets a little more washed out.
Yeah.
So some of that's getting into like early digital and stuff, but it's rich with colors. I'm pretty sure it's what is it, day for night? Is it day for night or day by night? Always confused.
It's day for night.
Day for night. I think that's how they did those surfing sequences. That'd be the safe way to do it instead of just like, hey, go surf in the dark. But I don't mind it. And again, it looks good. And surfers have to like this movie. I don't know any surfers because I'm in a landlocked state, but it does capture the philosophy of it well. I feel because again, as I said earlier, this movie is about battling ideologies, and I would argue one of the reasons it feels like an 80s movie, it's for a few reasons. First of all, I think what we think of as like the 80s or the 80s fashion or the whatever decade, it takes a few years for that decade to mature into its own, into its own identity. So a lot of times when we think of a certain decade, we're usually thinking like mid to late, part of that decade. In the same way that if you see a movie from 1980, it still can sometimes feel like a 70s movie,
which is one thing the show Freaks and Geeks got right, is that it's set in 1980 and it feels like the late 70s.
No, because this is about a transition. It's about a transition in our economy, in America's place in the world, in philosophies. I even think it even reminded me, even though this is like a Gen X movie, it reminded me a bit of Logan's Run, in that Logan's Run is a response to hippie ideology and the sort of vacuousness of some of that ideology or the hollow promise of it. And in a way, you have Patrick Swayze, who looks awesome in this role. Awesome as a blonde dude. Pulling off that blonde beard and stuff.
He looks cool as hell.
Yeah, he looks awesome in this movie. My only problem in this movie is like is Keanu too thin to be a quarterback? But I guess he never made it to NFL. And I don't know if Ohio State has a huge football program or did in the 80s. So
Yeah.
that's such a tiny, insignificant thing. But also the fact that his name is Johnny Utah. It's
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. What's his name from Dune? It's like that.
I don't know. It's like Joe Montana. He's a football player.
Yeah.
So you got that. It's all American though.
Yeah, it is all American. But that's what
Yeah.
I like is that when he's first talking to Tyler, he's trying to get in good with her. And so you think he's telling pretty much like a bullshit story about his backstory. And you're like, oh, this guy's good on the fly, and that it works. And it makes sense that it works because like the story it gives her is like, okay, this makes sense why you'd be out here. But I thought, okay, that's probably just complete bullshit. But then you realize that there's some truth to it, partially because they recognize him as a football player. I'm like, okay, I think that's clever to have it like a mix, and then you learn later that his parents aren't dead; they're just living in like
Right.
or whatever.
But I think everything he said about I was fulfilling their expectations,
Yeah,
and I had nothing for myself, 100% true.
I think that's true for sure. Yeah.
And you know, that's what makes this movie so interesting. This isn't quite going on into the there's been some, I guess, hindsight analysis of your sort of grunge era idolatry of slackerdom that happens in the post Berlin Wall falling America, where a lot of people talk, there's this phrase thrown around a lot that in hindsight is like laughably stupid, the end of history. And in the same way that like you have trouble for your own reasons and political reasons and like life experiences, have trouble watching war on terror movies, and I haven't seen it since high school, but I have trouble watching American Beauty, and this is irrespective of Kevin Spacey, and who's been acquitted, I guess. I don't know. But I don't know.
Yeah, he's got a deep reach into Hollywood's asshole. So
yeah, I don't know.
but true.
The idea that like, well, America's the dominant superpower. Are we just gonna be stuck here with ennui in the suburbs for the rest of our lives? You know, there's that sense in the 90s. Which I've been, speaking of Keanu Reeves, I've been on a big Matrix kick. Not even watching the Matrix, like reading Matrix lore and like listening to podcasts and just like digging into the franchise as a whole. But
I'd like to rewatch the fourth one.
Yeah, no, let's do it sometime. But there's this idea that Agent Smith says they made the Matrix of '99 like it's at the peak of human civilization. And in hindsight, I think that's kind of true. I think it's that like pre 9/11, at least in the West.
Yeah.
Like pre-war on terror. Yeah, you had your .com bubble, but like economically, we were in a surplus. Like our economy was doing a lot better than it was in a lot of the 80s. Which this movie addresses directly because the villains are presidents. They're the ex-presidents, you know. And I notice in most of the shots, the emphasis is on Nixon and Reagan. You have Carter and LBJ as the other masked men in there, but they're just kind of there as the most recent, as just presidents. And it's hard to hate Jimmy Carter, maybe as a politician, but as a dude, he seems all right. Somehow still alive, drinking the same stuff that Biden is. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and also like they're taking that ideal that to the very extreme of like that slacker idea, but like these guys are robbing banks multiple times a month just so they can just surf all day and not have to actually work. Like that's the most extreme version.
Oh, that's the most freeloader welfare baby. Like that makes, dude, yeah, that makes welfare queens look like paupers, man. Nothing. Which is it's an insane thing, and it's all about the rush. Because I mean, some people, I know biologically, a lot of people who are into extreme sports, neurologically, their threshold for excitement is just that high. You know, what is that documentary that came out a few years ago? Free Climber or something about that like guy
Free
who like
Solo.
yeah, Free Solo, who would like free climb stuff. They did an MRI or something on him, and it was like, yeah, your threshold for stimulation is higher than 99% of people. Like you're just kind of a genetic freak. And I feel bad for him because I'm like, can these people just not enjoy a movie?
Yeah,
Like,
I'm good on that kind of stuff.
I feel like my stimulation is threshold is too high just because I'm all ADD. And like that's
Yeah, like when we played Warzone for all of 2020, I was like, something's wrong with my brain.
that what you can just do that.
Yeah.
Well, that's also
But then like the idea of like going on a helicopter ride, I'm like, no, I'm good on that. I don't want to
can't do
that.
that. Helicopters are scary.
Yeah, too many people. I don't want to be Kobe Bryant.
No, no. Um, but well, that was also just like stupid. I think there were just bad
Dude,
conditions and stuff.
so many celebrities have died in helicopter crashes.
Well, I think a lot of it's celebrity hubris, and they're just like, no, we should go out because I've heard Bill Burr of all people talk about this, and just because he's like a hobbyist helicopter pilot, and he's like, if the weather's not perfect, I don't do it. We did that. Weren't we in Orlando and there were like 45-mile-an-hour winds? And we saw these like tiny little gyrocopter tours going on, and it was like tilted 30 degrees.
Like,
and I was like,
this.
I'm about to go on roller coasters, and I don't want to do this. You know, I mean, rocket roller coaster,
Rip,
whatever.
ride rocket.
Yeah, ride rock, whatever, ripping, whatever,
whatever that one at Universal is.
yeah, whatever
Fuck
that crappy Universal one that killed half my brain cells and gave me a migraine for the next hour, even though I don't even get.
That's where I get out my, lust for extreme stuff is roller coasters. But
yeah,
like,
I need good theming and lore to get out my. There's not enough theming and lore in base jumping. That's
no, I'm saying like coasters, especially at somewhere like our home park, Silver Dollar City, is very reputable. I'm a regular there. Their coasters are very well maintained and well looked after. Same for like Disney World, wherever. So like I don't feel that nervous on going on these coasters, but I still get the most exhilarating feeling. I am just not I'm just at a level where I don't want to risk doing something like going skydiving.
I was about to ask if you go skydiving. This movie makes me want to go skydiving. First of all, this is probably my favorite skydiving sequence I've done. I think Swayze ended up skydiving like 55 times for this. They had to.
It's really incredible. Like
it's
the footage they got.
It's the footage they got in the movie just luxuriates in the. It's important to the plot.
Yeah,
but the way the movie luxuriates in it, I'm completely fine with. And I would have loved to see this in theaters too.
Because it's an interesting way to develop the villains, because you can see just how much fun and like how much they're into that kind of feeling. They really are. It really elevates that. But also you get like you're wondering, is something about to happen? Is his shoot going to be fucked up or something?
Oh, the way they fuck with the audience's expectations. Because everybody knows they're on to everybody else.
Yeah.
Everybody knows. They're just not saying it. There's that sort of, what is it, dramatic irony playing there. And the way they're switching, no, use my shoot. No, use my shoot. Use my shoot. It makes you like so nervous for a while. And then you get this sort of calm of like, okay, they landed and it's fine.
Yeah.
And then immediately they switch to the, oh shit, Tyler's kidnapped.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because until that point, I was very sympathetic with Swayze's character in a lot of ways. To the point I'm like, is this movie going to end with like, Johnny Utah defecting from the FBI and just joining these guys? And then it's very much like, oh no, Swayze has gone too far. He's gone kind of crazy with this. And because he's a man of ideals, but nothing else. They're not rooted in anything. It's selfishness, really. He's a selfish guy, even though he pretends to be a bodhisattva. Bodhisattva in Buddhism is somebody who's like on the path to enlightenment. That's saying he's saying he's a 90s beach bro who read like a couple Zen koans and then was like, I'm going to adopt this personality for myself to make me seem more interesting than I actually am.
One of the better pseudo-intellectuals I've seen portrayed in a film, honestly, as of late.
No, he talks about, and the thing is, it is all rooted in very real emotions. You can't immediately be like, fuck this guy, he's a pseudo-intellectual, or fuck this guy, he's full of shit. When he's talking about like the freedom of surfing versus the, like he says, people commuting in their metal coffins or whatever he says. That's very trite and almost high schooly about people doing their 9 to 5. But at the same time, he's not entirely wrong. A lot of people do live that life. A lot of people choose that life because they don't have crazy high stimulation thresholds where they have to do extreme sports. But again, this movie is coming out of the Cold War. American capitalism has triumphed, seemingly. And there is a what now? And is your counterculture even rebelling against anything anymore? Because these ex-presidents are ex-presidents, you know? Yeah. We're in a new era. We just, you know, I guess by the time this was filming, Clinton was 91 elected, I believe. And so they're probably in the middle of an election. But it's like, well, what are you rebelling against now? You know, what happened? The man, it's, you know, it's kind of reminds me of the Big Lebowski telling the dude, like, you lost, condolences.
The bums lost.
The bums lost.
Yeah, that is like, that's like set during the same time too. Yeah, that's such a.
It is why it is. That's why they even have like George H.W. on. Yeah, we're coming out of H.W. I guess. George H.W. on the TV talking about this stuff. You know. And in the Big Lebowski, I mean, not in this movie. So there's this idea of like, what is a slacker lifestyle? And I think a lot of it is examining these counterculture ideas and like how much of this holds water. Because some of it does. Because by the end of the movie, part of Johnny Utah's character arc is like he internalizes some of this. But you know, moving way ahead, the last shot of this movie basically is him throwing away his badge and walking off. It ends very abruptly, but in a good way, and like like a very impactful way. It's like he throws it
in
off,
fact, that
off.
The last 5 minutes of that movie actually made me like it a lot more than I was originally.
Yeah,
because at first I felt like I was like, well, if you're just gonna cut from that scene in the desert to now he's been on the run, we don't see anything in between that, then why didn't you just end it in the desert? And then that's before I realized why, you know, they were going to end it how they ended it with him doing the surf, which is a really good ending for a villain.
Yeah,
I really like that.
He's not coming back.
Yeah, well, that made it. I was like, once I realized what they were going for thematically, I was like, okay, yeah, it makes sense why they would cut to this,
because it's a dead end. Any of those sort of like selfish ideologies are to a degree a dead end, and it is odd because this movie does because I think with Johnny Utah's character, he was always wanted to be kind of reckless and have this thrill, and that's why he became, but he was afraid to do that outside the confines of a system, which is why he became an FBI agent. But 90 like cop work, law enforcement, it's boring most of the time in real life. You know, most FBI agents, it's all those. In this movie, I think does convey this part well, of like stakeouts, sitting out getting meatball subs, getting two. Yeah, those are hefty meatball subs. I'm like, dude, I probably couldn't eat two of those. I'd have to be really hungry.
Yeah, two of them. Holy shit.
Yeah, dude. For Gary Busey, and he's like, I could have got 3. I'm like, damn, Gary. What are you doing in this? Which is funny at that point. It's a bit of a contrivance because he's like, it's only 10:30, and it's just a way to split them up to make it like the complication of the bank robbery happening while they're split up to make it more dramatic. There was a second though, I was like, ooh, is Gary in on it? Did he know that they were about to roll up and he wanted to get Johnny Utah to like?
That's what it felt like for a second.
That's what it felt like for a second. And
that's another way that she plays with the audience, and that's a lot of why I like the film, especially when they're going to have that raid on the house. And I'm like, this feels unrealistic, far-fetched that they would have a raid on this house without any major evidence at all, it felt like. And I was like, okay, so it plays with you in the way that you're like going in. I'm like, okay, this people in this house are a red herring. but then it plays it. They pull out guns. You're like, oh shit, no, this must be part of the crew they're going for. And then it's another reverse on that because it's an unrelated drug case. I'm like, okay, this was the right way to do this.
And that was Tom Sizemore in that role, I think. He shows up. Which he's had trouble in Hollywood. I think he got into like drinking too much and stuff, but I'm pretty sure it's Tom Sizemore who showed up as just like the DEA agent, which is funny because he perfectly conveys like how mad would you be?
Yeah, I've been working on that case forever.
Well, yeah.
And that's a good sequence too. And I like that the nude woman showering out of all people's like doing the most damage, like fucking Keanu up and stuff. Like
it's the last one you expect.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And it's kind of a there's because it's Kathryn Bigelow, one of the few prominent female directors in Hollywood, just being real.
Oscar winning.
Yeah, a few Oscar winning. Also, the fact that this movie opened against her husband's Terminator 2, and then later in 2009 we would have Hurt Locker versus Avatar for Best Picture. It's there's this, and they were married at the time when this came out.
Yeah, and he produced this movie. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it was fine for both of them. I'm sure they're financially.
Yeah, I think they're okay.
But they're. I'm pretty sure James Cameron has money. He didn't take any money for Titanic because it went over budget or over schedule.
Yeah.
He's just like, here, you can have my. It's like, well, you should ask.
Baller.
You should ask for a percentage. But also, he's like, I still literally can't spend my Terminator 2 money. It's I'm still.
That's a true artist. Like he wanted to see it complete. Like that's so cool.
No, I mean, Cameron's one of those. He's an interesting case where like he's truly a mass appeal artist, but at the same time he feels like a true auteur.
Yeah.
And has stuff to say that he wants to say, which I respect James Cameron a lot. It's hard not to, even if he can be difficult or whatever. Like he's, per film has to be like the highest grossing director, I'm sure, like per capita or whatever. He's up there.
Yeah, definitely.
I know Spielberg's the highest grossing, but he's made more movies, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It is funny. Anyway, my point is with female directors, they talk about like the female gaze versus the male gaze, which I was thinking in this movie. That it's interesting to have like a hyper macho action movie directed by a woman. And it does change it, George Miller for Mad Max, he had it edited by a woman, because he was like, I don't want this to look like every other action movie, which that paid off in spades. And in this, there are a lot of like hot dudes in this movie, which I'm fine with. Like, it's where even as a straight guy, like, listen, I appreciate a dude who works out and like has a six pack as an aspirational thing.
Of course.
Even though I'm not going to ever have a six. I have no. If you paid me to be in a Hollywood role and hired a nutritionist and personal trainer,
if they're like, we're gonna give you 8 months to get fucking built for this role,
TRT and stuff.
We're gonna pay you $2 million. Like, okay, you got it.
One of the things watching some older action movies that I always think is like, these look like high level yet attainable physiques. Yeah. Obviously, you'd have to work your ass off for years and have good genetics, which I don't have the genetics for a six pack. I can be skinny and I still have a pot belly, which is how I am. But it is interesting. I think steroids have been more and more normalized in action, and obviously in the 80s. Then we are coming out of the 80s era, the Stallone Schwarzenegger era of action movies, and we're getting more into like the Die Hard and this, where it's like more everyman, more relatable sort of action stars. Keanu's not super jacked in this movie. He's very in shape. You could see him as like an ex-athlete,
That's why I like so much about Harrison Ford. He's like in good shape, but he's not like this ripped motherfucker.
No, you can tell he's natty as Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
If anything, he's on TRT now. He has to be. But there's a lot, and like I said, there's people read homoerotic subtext into this. I don't know how much I'm not in this discussion. I'm not going to delve too much into that. Maybe if I watch it again. There's certainly a bromance because they want to like each other and they do have chemistry. And what you said, playing with the red herons. Did you ever think those first four guys he met were the bank robbers?
I didn't know what to think. I think the biggest thing I was worried about was whether Tyler was in on the thing or not. Because
Yeah,
at first I was like, man, she might be, that might be the twist, is that she's one of the bank robbers. But
right. I was thinking that because and I was pretty sure that not Kurt Russell. I always get him and Patrick Swayze confused for some reason. They kind of look
Interesting.
alike to me. They kind of look alike to me. I don't know. They have that same look. Patrick Swayze, I did think like he's going to end up being the bad guy. Like, but they are playing with your expectations. It was too easy when he found those first four, whatever they call them, that gang. As a moviegoer. But again, the way they play with your like, oh, is this real? Oh shit, there are guns. Oh wait, no, it's DEA thing.
yeah,
No, yeah, this movie's kind of a masterclass in playing with audience expectations.
I do like that detail of like Gary Busey's character realizes that Keanu's getting the shit beat out of him, and he runs up and like in a millisecond pulls something out of his ass to pretend like he's like looking for something or someone.
Yeah, like his car, somebody stole his car stereo and
Yeah.
he's chasing after him. Yeah.
Like,
I'm sure, dude,
as
if
he's
you're in the
running into
FBI
him.
and he's a
Yeah.
veteran, he's the veteran FBI agent. Like,
Yeah.
you got to be able to do that. And the coded way, both in the writing and in the performance of Keanu kind of smarmily being like, yeah, but there's four guys back there you might want to check out. And the way it works on multiple levels of like, he's kind of like bullshitting, like, yeah, I fucked those guys up, but you should actually go check them out. But also, I'm saying this for the benefit of Bodhi right next to me. Like, yeah, there's for being an on the surface very like macho action movie. No, there's a lot of subtlety in the dialogue and everything, and the way it plays with audience expectations and plays with tropes.
Totally. I do not like the thing I don't dislike the most about the movie is that Gary Busey's character gets killed because of all this bullshit. And I feel like it could have been prevented.
It does suck.
I feel, yeah, because I'm like, okay.
Does it feel sadistic to you?
A bit. And I'm like, when he has to fake he has to go with them on the bank heist and like shit goes crazy. And then he's being arrested and for all that stuff. I'm like, surely this could have been talked out and figured out so they didn't have to feel like they have to go solo together to go save the day. Like it just feels unnecessary. Obviously, it's for the fun of the movie, having the two guys take it on together because that's like a classic trope. But like, or sometimes often it's like the one cop who like gets kicked out and then he has to do shit himself. But
no,
I feel like that could have been prevented. I don't think he had to die, and I really fucking
no. And these, by the way, these two cops in this movie really see. This is why Kathryn needs to be here to call this propaganda. But it's very much a shoot first, ask questions later. Because I know these people are threatening people, but they never killed anybody. They've just taken a few thousand at a time, and they're immediately opening fire on these guys in the highway. I know it's an action movie, but it's very much like, okay, these are
it's a little much,
but it's the movie.
Yeah, I mean,
but this movie is referenced and parodied in Hot Fuzz, which is points out stuff like that, especially from our British perspective on American policing, where the Brits I don't even think have guns most of the time. But British police, I mean, don't even necessarily carry guns, especially in the countryside. Because there's that joke where they watch Point Break earlier in the movie, and then Nick Frost does the same thing where he fires his gun.
Yeah.
He does that.
That's clicking now. Okay.
No, because I
knew I'd seen that scene somewhere.
And I'm like, he did the thing. He shot it in the air.
Yeah.
Which is it is easy to make fun of, especially like don't lie in the ground and shoot bullets in the air because what goes up, there's gravity. It's not a good idea, but it is, jokes aside, as ridiculous as that is, and I've seen it like parodied and referenced. It is a great scene because you do have that like extreme close up of both of them. You see Swayze's eyelids under the Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, I guess it's enough for Keanu to figure it out.
I mean, he had already figured it out, but he just looked at him. They exchanged that knowing glance. He's like, I can't shoot this guy. I
like the whole way that chase scene is shot.
That whole chase scene rules.
It's awesome, especially when he locks the screen door and Keanu just bursts through into this person's house, and it's just like, oh my
And then
god.
she's beating him with the vacuum hose
Yeah.
attached. Just like doing it.
Oh my god. You're
No,
like,
there's so many, and that's a great example of like small little complications. Because we've talked about this before. Like we talked about this in Indiana Jones of like your action scenes need beats, you know, like
Yeah.
it can't just be, and they're in a car and they turn down here and they turn down here. Like you can't have that too many shots in a row. Because for multiple reasons, A, it just gets repetitive, but B, it's like you have to like geographically establish where stuff is, and it's easy to get lost if there's not enough like. But you know, you have the chase scenes of like the old Indiana Jones versus Dial of Destiny we talked about.
God.
But in this, yeah, that just drags on. But in this, you have a lot of great beats because you have that. You have them like first in the street, and then in neighborhoods, and then in houses, and then coming out of the houses, and he like throws the pit bull at him, which is
Yeah,
another.
he throws a whole ass dog.
He picks up a dog and throws it at him, which is funny.
The dog,
and then going
damage.
into the canal after, and
Yeah.
we have that good setup screenwriting 101 of like he had a knee injury and then he falls, and you're like, oh no, you know. It's great. It's good stuff. And just the fact the steady cam work and the handheld camera work through all that of good classical analog filmmaking.
Yeah, a husband and wife both putting out banger action movies the same year is cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, Terminator 2 has some awesome chase
you think about
both those movies have chase scenes in the Los Angeles Canal.
Yeah, that chase scene in Terminator 2 is like one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, there's multiple in there.
So
there's
good.
one where they were gonna, I think James Cameron shot, it's later in the movie, but there's a helicopter that goes like under an overpass.
Yes,
it's really dangerous, and the cameraman was like, I don't want to film that, and James was like, I'll do it, screw it.
He had a stunt coordinator or someone on the crew that was like, we can do this, but they're not gonna be happy about it. And it's like, oh, we'll do it. Don't worry. Some of the crew didn't want to be involved, but he had a wild card guy who was like, yeah, we can do this. And he knew that he could do it. And that is crazy to see, because that would never be allowed today.
No, it's so wrong. And then they would CG it, which is fine. That's, I mean, for safety, I'm CG, I'm fine for safety purposes, especially in a post Alec Baldwin accident world.
Yeah, for sure.
And I it is funny. It's there's a great example of it's actually Matt Damon talking on Late Night referring to Tom Cruise, but when Tom Cruise scales the Burj Khalifa, apparently Tom Cruise was telling this story. He's like, I was asking the stunt guy, like, how do we have me climbing on the Burj Khalifa? And he said, you can't do that. So I hire a new stunt guy. Which I think is part of it, making movies like that. It's like, dude, you're out or in, because people die. I mean, hell, there's in that Vin Diesel. This is like a guilty pleasure from my adolescence, but Triple X, the Vin Diesel movie. There's a guy who died during a stunt in that because he's like ziplining from a parachute down the rope onto a boat while it's going underneath a bridge. I'm like, yeah, some guy down from that. So yeah, some people don't get enough recognition. If the Oscars wasn't already so damn long, I would say add a stunt category.
They're considering it.
Yeah, I know there is like its own award show for stunts, but it's pretty crazy. Although they already kind of do it, especially with Mission Impossible, but I'd be worried, like, let's make a crazy, dangerous stunt to get an award. Like, you don't want to encourage that for its own sake. I don't know. But also, I think stunt people, again, it's that job where your biologies, you're just built different. This movie's about being built different and just being in extreme sports.
This movie's definitely a Saturday matinee movie, I'd say. Just like
this one?
Yeah, like you go see with your dad. There's surfing. There's shoot 'em ups. You had a good time. You leave. You know.
Yeah, dude. No, I could totally see as like spend the morning surfing, go get some fish tacos, go see this movie, go get some more fish tacos or whatever.
Rob a bank.
You know, bang a woman named Tyler for some reason
on the sand.
Oh, dude. That's another thing. Sex on the beach. If I had sex on the beach, I would have pearls forming under my man titties from all the sand I would have trapped up with the heat under there.
Yeah, Parker saw that and she's like, I will never do something like that. And I was like, yeah, me neither.
You're a beach fiend. Nah, dude. We're chubby too. Like we don't have these 90s action bodies. We have modern internet.
That's just stupid though. Like just
no,
go.
it's a ridiculous thing. I wonder what the first movie with sex on the beach was. Let's do it. It is beautiful. And that though it does serve an important plot point because he's like, oh, I'm late. And then he goes immediately from surfing and making love to that shit show of a bust.
Yeah.
Imagine having that 24 hours in your life. Well, yeah, I surfed all night. Then I had sex on the beach. I was late for a drug bust that I got stabbed in. I love the lawn mowing.
Oh yeah.
All the complications of the lawnmower. It's so simple. I was wondering how they filmed for safety putting his face that close to the mower. Did they just build like a prop mower that was safer?
Yeah, surely
it was like rubber blades or something. Just in case.
Yeah, something like that.
Because then it would scratch him without.
But it sure looked good.
Oh, it looked very real. It looked like he was really struggling.
Once they got to like the airport and they're having that shootout and then they're getting on the plane, I'm like, I was starting to like kind of worry that it was losing its footing, that it maybe didn't know, because I didn't know where it was headed. So I was like kind of feeling like, is this starting to fall apart a bit? But then once I realized what they were building towards, it was fucking awesome because it was like when they jump out of the plane and then we get Keanu say fuck it with a gun out and jump from a plane.
Oh, it's so awesome. Dude. So awesome.
There was like that was one of the most audible guffaws I've ever had watching a movie. I like sat up. I was like, what the fuck, dude?
I was wondering if he was going to do it. I was like, you know what would be cool? If he just jumped out right now. And then they did it. I'm like, this movie fucking rules.
he said, fuck it. It's easily just gone wrong. Like whatever.
Willing to risk it all. Looks like he's not wearing a parachute. I'm sure he has something underneath his jacket or whatever, but
that was just like a true, like, okay, this movie's crazy.
This is the climax. We're doing it. And it was all shot real because I was talking about I saw there's a movie from what is it, 2007? Yeah. Clive Owen, Paul Giamatti, Monica Bellucci movie called Shoot 'Em Up from 2007.
Yeah.
Which is an excuse to have the most ridiculous action scenes you can, because the whole joke of the movie is that Clive Owen is Bugs Bunny and Paul Giamatti is Elmer Fudd. It's a live action sort of over the top. I mean, that's like he's literally eating carrots in the first scene. Part of the joke is he eats a lot of carrots because it makes his eyesight good so he can shoot people.
Whatever.
It's a goofy movie. It's flawed. I mean, there's a scene where he like rappels down. There's a spiral staircase and he rappels down the middle and just like 360 no scopes, like unloads a machine gun and kills all the guys. Shit like that. But the climax of that movie is a gunfight while skydiving.
Okay.
But they do it all green screen or blue screen. Like you can tell it's all effects driven, and it's not the biggest budget movie. It's a smaller budget. And it doesn't work as well. Which all of that to say, I really appreciate the time and effort they spent really skydiving, really getting cameramen to skydive. Who has both those skill sets?
Hell yeah, dude.
And
it makes the movie look so good. Yeah,
so good. I love those scenes. I love those sequences. It makes me want to go skydiving, even though it's like the ultimate white people shit. It's like you have to simulate. I'm not the first person to say that, but like you got to simulate danger in your own life. It's relatively affordable. I think it's only like a couple hundred.
I'm good. I'll spend that on a fucking ticket to a fucking theme park.
Yeah. Well, or a flight to a city where you don't have to jump out of the plane.
Yeah.
No, this movie is full of great things, great performances. The more you think about, I do hate that Gary Busey dies. It does feel a little sadistic. But also I think I think it does lead up to his final resignation from the FBI. It helps lead up to that, where he's just like, I don't want to do this anymore. And also, I never wanted to do this because this job isn't what I thought it would be, and I have to compromise too many things, you know.
That makes sense. I do. Yeah, it's dramatic, but I do like it ending on him throwing away his badge.
No, it's what needed to happen. It was the logical conclusion of his character. Everything was logical yet unexpected, which is exactly what you want in a movie, in any sort of screenwriting. I do wonder how much this influence it had to like surf culture and culture in the 90s. Does life imitate art, or does art imitate life?
Oh yeah.
I think a lot about like these pre-20 like the 20th century movies and how people like other countries viewed it, and like did other countries like view this and like see surf culture? I mean, I know there's stuff in Australia and other countries of surf cultures, but did people in like, I don't know, Poland or Germany see this and I mean, we're like, yeah, this is America. There's a guy named Johnny Utah, and he's
yeah,
and he's banging people.
I'll say overall, probably Endless Summer had the biggest impact.
Endless Summer, yes, that's the surf movie. The fact that there's the Endless Summer Resort outside Universal, right? Which is so weird because it's not an obscure movie, but it's not a movie a lot of people have seen.
More popular back in the day.
And more people have heard of it than seen it, but it's like, it's kind of interesting. Like but I think a lot of Universal is like, because of the death of monoculture and like Hollywood ain't what it used to be, the idea of like a movie theme park where a lot of people like kids haven't seen E.T., you know, because there's not a monoculture, which is a shame because that movie rules and that ride rules. It's an all timer, or even like the Old Mummy, you know, it's kind of interesting concept for a theme park.
Thank God they didn't retheme it to that new one.
No, hell no. Be terrible. There is some stuff at Universal actually referencing the time, like in the movie Monster, like special effects
makeup show. Yeah,
the makeup show. They talk about like the 2015 Mummy.
It felt like they kind of had to.
They had to. And it's like, have they been doing this for 9 years, just referencing this movie?
I think that movie was 2017.
2017, whatever. Still 7 years. Still. But they did remake this movie.
Oh yeah, Jesus. What the fuck was that for? I forgot about that.
It's kind of weird that it even happened. There was a script of a remake floating around, and I feel like this movie was successful. It's $24 million budget, $83.5 million box office. So, you know, it's more than 2.5 times its budget. Which I think marketing budget and just budgets in general, like, I don't know if the 2.5 times rule, because that's the rule of thumb now, is like you have to make 2.5 times your production budget with marketing and everything. I don't know if that was as true back then. But it, you know, it was a modest success. It wasn't a Terminator 2 success, but it was a good success. Yeah. But there's an interesting thing where because this ushered in the era of extreme sports. I could see them doing like a 2003 version of this, kind of the same way like Triple X was, of like extreme sports, but now it's the early 2000s and we're doing it like Fast and the Furious style.
Yeah.
But I feel like that was too close to Hollywood. Used to space out its reboots a bit more, I feel.
Yeah.
Instead of it being every like 8 years. But like, weren't there like 2 Shaft reboots?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know how many Shaft.
Luke Bracey? Who the fuck is this guy? Like, what?
Oh, are you talking about no, here's the thing. The reboot, the remake, I mean, that was released in 2015 was there. I don't recognize a single one of these actors, first of all. Keanu was already established.
Yeah.
Swayze was already established. I don't recognize a single one of these actors.
Ray Winstone, yeah.
And I remember seeing the trailers and it looking very generic because it was just like bank robbers, stunt, like shots of stunts, but there was no insight into the characterization or the plot other than that. At the time, I hadn't seen Point Break, so I think a lot of people, it may have been marketing it to a younger audience, but at the same time being a nostalgia-driven picture not in the way that we have our legacy sequels now, but just as a reboot. Because I mean, that was The Force Awakens. That was, when we started doing the whole legacy sequel, 2015. Which is interesting because I'm like, I don't see parents taking their kids to this movie as much. Maybe
it happened. It started before Force Awakens.
Yeah,
I'd say, Tron Legacy 2010.
Oh yeah, you're right. Which I haven't seen that because I'll be honest, I didn't care for the original Tron that much. I need to give it another watch, but
filtered.
I filter. Maybe it's because I watched it in class, like in school. I think might be why.
That's a fucking nerdy ass movie. You should like that movie.
That's right. I watched it, but I watched it all in once. It was a computer class, and it was a 2-hour class actually in high school. But also I hated that teacher so much, so maybe that tainted it because that class sucked and the teacher was just an asshole. But yeah, it seems almost. Here's the thing, though. We talk about ballooning budgets on this. The budget for the reboot was $105 million, and even with inflation, that's over twice. That's like 2.5 times what the original costs, because they do a lot of stuff. I think in the Alps and in other locations outside, so they make it a very stunt-driven thing. But I think it lacks all of these character moments and playing with the audience expectations. Again, I haven't seen it. I'm not going to. I'm not that.
Well, 5.3 out of 10 on IMDb, 11% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, 11%. I think the problem is it's a crappy movie.
It's a soulless remake. Yeah, that happens.
No. And it's also a joint American, German, Chinese production.
Oh, boy.
So they just cobbled stuff together to get this movie made. So I'm sure the studio notes were copious, not to mention in multiple languages. So yeah. I don't know how they cobbled together. The idea of a Point Break remake, I think, was just ill-fated at first. But I think the script was floating around and somebody pitched it and some people were like, screw it. I don't know. I feel like there's a version of, because this is not a heist movie, it is an action movie, but like I feel like there is a version where you could make like an action sports type heist movie if that hasn't been done. But do you have to name it Point Break? Even the title Point Break, I didn't know it's a type of surf break, and they had trouble naming this movie initially. They were going to name it Riders on the Storm, but then they're like, Riders on the Storm isn't even about surfing. The song isn't. Just because that song's popular. So they call it Point Break, which is, I didn't know what that was. This is probably the last thing I'm going to say, but I also like the title of this movie where it has Swayze, Reeves, like going in opposite directions and crossing each other, and has Point Break doing the same thing. It's just the amount of garish and like overproduction that I like in my titles.
Hell yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's Point Break from 1991. We'll be doing a few more summer themed episodes this summer. Might be a little bit of a different schedule than usual. I'm not sure yet. We're working on some new things. Really trying to put out this Disney attractions video, which I've been working on off and on, but I've been so busy lately. I'm finally getting that one done. And then we're doing there's going to be towards the end of the month, or towards early July, we'll be doing I'll be doing a Saltburn video, so look forward to that. Other than that, I've got a book for sale if you want to read something I made. We have a tie-in film, and then you can follow Scott for a comedy. You can see it under his name here on the little graphic.
Scott K Comedy, Instagram. Follow my gigs coming up.
We got some stuff, you can find more stuff. We have a whole nother channel called The Mooring Line with all kinds of old sketches and stuff. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back soon with a lot of new stuff this summer, so look forward to that. Thanks for listening.